A level 2 out of 5 for the likelihood of strong to severe storms. This is considered a low-end threat, but it does include DFW, so we'll be watching that. And the timeline for this looks to be after 3 in the afternoon. We'll see some showers out there, breezy conditions, but after 3, we'll start to see these thunderstorms developing mainly east of DFW. Eventually, that coverage expands to include the Metroplex between 3 and 5 in the afternoon. That coverage at about a 50% through 7, 8 o'clock this evening. We'll eventually see this coverage lower as we approach midnight, but we could very well see a few lingering showers here and there as we approach very early Thursday morning. A lot of us looking at just some cloud cover overhead as we get through the day on Thursday. Thursday afternoon, the threat is going to be shifted west of DFW, and on Friday, the threat does include most of North Texas, and this is going to be for the potential of up to quarter-size hail and 40+ mile-per-hour wind gusts. The tornado threat is higher north of the Red River in Oklahoma Friday afternoon. Meanwhile, temperatures staying warmer than normal will stay in the close to 80 degrees Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, upper 60s Saturday, near 70 on Sunday. Tuesday, another day to be weather aware next week.
Thanks for joining us for After the Vote. I'm Jason Whiteley, joined here in studio by Jason Wheeler and Natalie Haddad from WFAA in Dallas. Our good friend Ashley Godot with us from KVUE in Austin right here behind us on the big screen. And Bud Kennedy is here from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. Over the next half hour here, we're going to take apart that unprecedented primary election in Texas. I started to say in Dallas and in Austin, but this is across the state. It's kind of hard to think about here for a moment. The blockbuster U.S. Senate race is what everyone is talking about right now. We're also going to discuss the incumbents who lost the races and then the confusion at the polls in Dallas County and in Williamson County. Top line summation, though, headline from this, Bud. We're going to start with you. What do you think it is from last night?
I think it's the failure to launch for the Jasmine Crockett campaign. She came in with all this name ID, so popular, so well known, so well liked among Democrats, had a wide lead in early polls, and then just never really got a ground game cranked up in her campaign.
Natalie?
I would agree. I also think that a big talking point from last night that will continue for a long time is the epic failure of communication, proper communication to voters about specific precincts. Here in Dallas County, it was unlike anything I think any of us had really experienced.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in Dallas County and in Williamson County, too. Ashley, what was it from your vantage point? What do you think the headline is here from the Tuesday election?
Yeah. You know, I think counter to what Bud said, I think it's a little bit of the opposite. I think it is about the momentum behind James Tallarico. I think, you know, when you look at what he came in with, which was no name ID going into the vote, there's polls that said 1 in 3 Texas voters, Democratic Texas voters, still didn't know who he was. And yet that did not seem to matter because he came out with a big win during the election.
It was a big win, and it seems like the Jasmine Crockett may have started too late in the very last day to file. What do you think the big headline was from last night?
I think mine kind of touches on a little bit of this, and that is it was a change election, which, you know, we see a lot of times in midterms, but this one in particular, I mean, we had incumbents who lost here in Texas. We hadn't, you know, seen something like that in recent memory. And voters were apparently ready for a change, not just on the Democratic side, because, you know, we expected that in this midterm with Republican control in Washington and here in the state, but also on the Republican side.
Yeah, indeed so. So we have 2 big boards going right now between Austin and in Dallas. We're going to start with Wheeler on the big board in Dallas. He's been working this thing left and right. County by county results here.
Let's head over to it.
Let's look at the biggest races here in the state so far.
All right, so I think we're going to have to touch on these in particular here. This is the U.S. Senate race. This was expected to be a runoff all along, and that's what we've got here. The incumbent John Cornyn and the current Attorney General Ken Paxton, who is vying for that job, separated by only about 1 point here, 25,000 or so votes. A lot of the polls coming into this had John Cornyn, flipped in this one, not in front. He was in front for the entire night last night and into the day today. This is with almost all of the vote counted across Texas. So they'll be heading to a runoff in late May. The big news today that we got this morning is that Democrats, meantime, their race has been settled as well on the Senate side. No runoff needed here. James Tallarico, as we just discussed, was able to pull this one out. That's why he's got the check mark by his name and his name only here. 52.4% to Jasmine Crockett's 46.2%. I think that's a wider margin than some might have thought. Almost 144,000 votes separating them statewide, with just a little bit more of the vote left to come in. The other big race of the night, bigger race of the night, was for Attorney General here in Texas. We will have our first new Attorney General in more than 10 years here because Ken Paxton is in that Senate race. Mays Middleton, who, of course, branded himself MAGA Mays Middleton and all of those ads that you've seen on TV, will be going to run off with Chip Roy, Representative Chip Roy. Again, a lot of the polls had those flipped, and so the poll was off on that one. And then on the Democratic side here, this one has been called. Again, usually you got to get above, you always have to get above 50% to avoid a runoff in a primary. There's still just a little bit of the vote out. The AP, though, still believing that Nathan Johnson will pull this out and will not have to go to a runoff with Joe Jaworski there. So it'll be interesting to see when that number actually goes over 50, but the AP has called that one.
Yeah,
Bud, you're shaking your head on that.
I don't see how you can do that.
I'm wondering, too, because we see this 4% estimated vote remaining.
Right.
I just don't know how you could pick that up in time. we may see a change back on
And the
that.
Democrats, 70% of the vote in the Democratic primary was early vote. So you're talking about having to make up another 2% out of the election day. I don't see that possible.
Yeah,
well,
I wouldn't be shocked to see that in a runoff.
You know, Jaworski's probably working the phone to try to make the runoff here. Let's start back with the Republican runoff for U.S. Senate. Ashley, I want to start with you here. As Jason mentioned, the polls did not predict this. Cornyn did a heck of a lot better than polls said the entire race here.
Yeah, and I think it's important to look at, the map in terms of, and I'm just going to go back here to what was said, is if you look at where Cornyn won versus where Paxton won, it's a little different color. We're in the Christmas spirit over here in KVU with this particular map compared to what you guys had at WFAA. But if you look at where the votes were coming in for Cornyn, you look at the push that Cornyn did right before the election, those ads where he was really on the attack. Everyone knows about the no bull, I'm not going to say it, ad where he just straight out came for Ken Paxton. And I think he has long said that this is a race that in his mind is about the character of the person, the character of the candidate, not necessarily the policies, because policies, they're both a Republican. And so I think that's where you really saw that resonate. And it's going to be interesting to see, though, how he can get his message out along the border, right? Because this is where you see a lot of support for Ken Paxton versus Senator John Cornyn.
And when we talk about how vicious the race is there, Bud, what Ashley just said, 289,000 votes is what the big board shows Wesley Hunt got. Where do those votes go? Because both sides need them, Paxton and Cornyn.
Prevailing opinion was that the Wesley Hunt's votes were not going to be Cornyn's votes, that they would go to Paxton. I don't think that's true. I think they'll be split evenly. I think the voters who come back out just liked Wesley Hunt, and now they're going to make their second choice. John Cornyn has positioned himself as the safe choice. And I think the same messages in the primary of, this is the candidate who can beat James Tallarico, I think those will resonate with Wesley Hunt's voters. The other question is, what does John Cornyn bring in the terms of firepower that he hasn't already brought? I think he'll turn the campaign to talk about Paxton, but to talk more about Paxton enriching himself during his time in office. He'll try to distance him from the people of Texas, from the voters, by saying, look how rich this guy's gotten, look at the money that he's thrown around, look, this guy is not like you, he's not an ordinary Texan. I think he'll focus more on money and less on morals.
But they've used all that. I mean, Cornyn's used every bit of that in his attack ad so far.
They've used all that, but the morals is what people remember, and the rest of it just kind of flies by because of all the emphasis on Paxton's behavior. And then, you have I heard a radio host in Dallas this morning say, how can you vote for a guy whose whole staff turned him in for corruption?
Mm-hmm. And of course, the other wild card here, Natalie, is whether President Trump does endorse now. Here we are the day after the polls have closed, and there's talk that Trump might endorse in this race to prevent this huge spending spree that we're likely going to see going into the runoff.
I'm curious to see what kind of effect a Trump endorsement even has on this race. I mean, we look at other races, specifically with like Sid Miller, agricultural commissioner, where that didn't really seem to make a difference, and maybe Trump came in too late in the game. This is already kind of late in the game.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you've got some buffer time here before the midterm elections, but I'm curious to see if that even makes a difference if you were to give an endorsement to
Natalie,
Trump.
that did make a difference because Sid Miller won Election Day, even though he didn't come close. He won the Election Day vote after Donald Trump's endorsement. Donald Trump's endorsement, the polls say, is worth 10 points in the Senate race. So somebody's going to get those 10 points, probably John Cornyn, but we don't really know.
But, Ashley, I can't imagine, even if President Trump does endorse John Cornyn, and who knows what the president may or may not do here, I can't imagine that Paxton's going to fold after that. Paxton's, always says he's the MAGA guy, and he's widely seen as that as well. I mean, what happens to Paxton if Cornyn does get the president's endorsement?
So, I mean, I think that that's a long way off. I think that the president, in terms of who he's going to endorse, if he does decide to make an endorsement, he would wait. He wins either way, right? Either one of these candidates, if they win, either way, the president is good because he has said that he likes them both. I think what's going to be a little telling is, does Wesley Hunt throw his support behind Paxton and ask all of his supporters to turn around and vote for Paxton over Cornyn? And I think that's going to be interesting. I think what's going to happen with the president is it's going to be a very late endorsement, if an endorsement at all.
You know, people are burning up the phones right now to try to talk to the White House, to Wesley Hunt, and everybody else.
Dan Patrick is burning up that phone.
I bet so. But the runoff between these two guys is going to be May 26th, and you know, that's the day after Memorial Day.
That's the question.
And so who shows up? And it's the most diehard voters who show up. Does that benefit Paxton? Does that benefit Cornyn?
I would think Paxton, because, you know, again, he's the more MAGA candidate. He may have that edge with the more diehard voters. And, you know, when we see runoffs like this, Bud, you've seen these over the years, they don't typically favor the incumbent. If an incumbent barely, you know, makes it through the primary and gets into a runoff, a lot of times that goes badly for them. And again, just the timing of this, the Tuesday after Memorial Day, that's going to be a tough one, and only those core supporters are going to be showing up. We're going to see a much lower turnout for that.
Of course, that's how we see Senator Ted Cruz was first elected in a runoff. That was in July, August, but he was elected by 2% of the voters in Texas. That's who sent him to Washington to start his career. In this case, the day after Memorial Day, you know, some of Cornyn's voters will already be on vacation. The only thing I'll say is that this election, more Republicans adapted to early voting than before. More than 60% of Republicans voted early. If Cornyn can get people to vote early in mid-May, that may help.
Wow. Ashley, go ahead.
I was going to say the other thing, though, is yes, the diehards turn out in those runoffs, but also the older voters. And I think for the older voters, that question of character within their person that they want to elect, I think that's going to really, really matter to them. And so if we see John Cornyn continue to push the gas on this and talk about Paxton's character, it could really work out in his favor come May.
All right, Ashley, let's get to work on your big board down there, too. Central Texas has two pretty big congressional races after a couple of folks have left. Chip Roy, of course, left to run for Texas Attorney General, giving up that seat, and Michael McCall gave up his seat as well, just retiring from Congress. A lot of eyes on who might succeed both of these guys.
Yeah, so let's talk about those races, right? So we'll start with Congressman Michael McCall, who decided to step out. And for both of these races, I want to tell you, the list was long. Voters had plenty of choices in terms of who they were gonna choose. But Chris Gober came out on top for this particular race, so for the Republican side. And it was a pretty decisive win, you know, a win with more than, or nearly, I'll say, 28,000 votes ahead of his closest competitor. He's going to go face off, if we turn to the Democratic side of things, against Caitlin Rourke. And again, she got a really big lead, a 20,000 vote lead over the competitors in that race. And so, you know, these candidates, though, I do think have their work cut out for them for voters to learn who exactly they are and the messages that they're going to have to get out to them. If we look at Congressman Chip Roy,
before you switch off from that race right there, that gerrymandering is stunning to me. So
it's like 12 counties.
This goes from the other side, the west side of Austin, to the Louisiana border here. What do these people have in common?
The west side of Austin, this little piece of, because you guys know where Congressman Michael McCall lives, right? In Austin. So we got this part and then all of this. You know, and it's funny because this is East Texas, and one might argue that the values of people in East Texas are quite different from the values and the issues that people face in Austin. One might. But nonetheless, this is the map. I didn't draw it. I'm just here to talk. And that's what it is.
All right, the next race then.
Many of those West Austin voters voted for Roger Williams, who lives in Parker County.
Yeah. If you look at 21, this was Congressman Chip Roy's district. And again, this is one of those where you had a long list of Republicans who wanted to throw their names in the hat there. But I don't think it was a lot of surprise to have Mark Teixeira take this one home by a big lead, almost by a 49,000 lead over the next competitor. People know who he is, right? You guys know for sure.
Yep.
Up there in Dallas,
Texas
and
Ranger.
his message certainly resonated with folks out here. Over here on the Democratic side of things, Kristen Hook took the lead here. Again, a sizable lead among Democrats. And it will be a heavy lift. You know, the Democrats like to say for the first time in decades, they were able to get someone to run in all of these races. That's why we have a lot more blue on our side than some of even the uncontested races with the Republicans. And so they're really happy about that. But the reality and the tough thing for them is going to be, can you actually flip these districts in November? And the work really starts now if they're they're going to try to be even remotely successful with that.
Yeah, indeed. So, all right, stand by just a moment here, Ashley. You know, there are 5 incumbents who right now are on track to lose their positions after the Tuesday primary. These names are pretty well known in Texas politics. Texas Agriculture Commissioner Sid Miller got that endorsement from President Trump, but it seemed to be too late because it was just days before the election here. Nate Sheets came out on top, backed by Governor Abbott. Miller is the first statewide Republican official, Bud, correct me if I'm wrong here, to lose his position in years. I can't remember the last time this has happened in the last couple decades.
I didn't dig back that far, Jason.
All right, well, if anyone would know, it's you, so if you're not going to correct me. The race for Texas comptroller also appears to be over right now, is over. Kelly Hancock, the acting comptroller, endorsed by the governor, lost to Don Huffines. Huffines, of course, served in the state Senate from Dallas, and he won this race outright. In Dallas County, a surprise. District Attorney John Creuzot just conceded losing his re-election to former Judge Amber Givens. Givens has been in the news as well. She faced 2 sanctions for judicial misconduct recently, but she is appealing those. In Houston, voters ousted Dan Crenshaw in Houston. He is a 4-term congressman there. State Rep Steve Toth from the Woodlands defeated Crenshaw after Crenshaw has served 8 years in Congress. And a veteran Democrat in Austin lost his seat. State Rep Chris Turner was the minority leader for House Democrats for a number of years. He lost last night to Junior Izanu, a young progressive who serves on the city council in Grand Prairie. Izanu now on track to become the Democratic nominee for this seat. Bud, how in the world did Turner lose this seat for as well known as he is?
Well, one of the reasons is Jasmine Crockett. Jasmine Crockett represents that part of southeast Arlington and West Grand Prairie, and she turned out a tremendous number of voters, younger voters, progressive voters. Junior Izanu is a very good candidate. He represented himself well on the Grand Prairie City Council. He really worked the district, and he really was able to fit the profile of who's voting now in the Democratic primary, particularly in southeast Tarrant County.
Did Turner take this at all for granted, do you think?
He really stepped on the gas the last few weeks of the campaign.
He knew something was happening then.
There's been so much going on. I mean, he works on a statewide level, and he'd been working in other campaigns, but he more than anyone knows what's going on because he's been running the campaigns in that part of Tarrant County for a long time. I think he was just caught up by the tremendous turnout and the young vote and the progressive vote that saw him as an old business Democrat.
Wow. And Natalie, for anyone who's covered Texas politics, especially Democratic politics in the state, that's a surprise.
This was like one of those sleeper races,
right.
I think. And this was not one that I was anticipating seeing the outcome for. I mean, he's a progressive. He's running to raise minimum wage. I mean, we've had the same minimum wage for, Bud, do you know how long? I mean, forever.
Bud, you're on the spot again here, man.
Being in the newspaper business, I should know.
Right. We can't really talk about that. But like, yeah, it's, he's let me preface this by saying that Chris Turner is in no way, shape, or form old, but a part of me wonders if voters are just ready to see this new generation.
He's seasoned. He's seasoned.
Seasoned. Yeah, he's got some season.
That's what we were called.
Yeah, but he's 26 years old, and I think people want to see new, fresh faces that are bringing these more progressive ideas to the table.
Again, it goes back to that theme of change.
Right, yeah,
election.
exactly.
He's bright, he's young, and he ran very closely to the Crockett campaign.
And actually, in Austin, considering how important Chris Turner was for a number of years in the House of Representatives, did this catch people there off guard as well? Is anyone talking about this?
I think it does take people by surprise. I mean, we all saw the results this morning and we were like, okay, wait a minute, what just happened? Because no one was really anticipating incumbents to this degree being stripped. And we talk about progressive and the progressive ideas. And I mean, I don't want to knock Junior. I think obviously he has a lot of progressive ideas, but some of those things are the same things that Chris Turner has been fighting for. Right. He's not by any means an old school Democrat. He's also talking about raising the minimum wage. He's also talking about funding schools in a different way. He's also talking about immigration. So he has also been on top of all of these issues and talking about the same thing. I think it's just a matter of people wanting to see something different right now. And they think that different, how are they going to get that change? How are they going to impact real change to change their situations? Democrats want to see some new things happening.
It's a new day in Tarrant County starting the year without Mark Vesey or Chris Turner in office.
I thought about that. Both of them work for Congressman Martin Frost.
They're both
Years
from the
ago,
Martin
right?
Frost School, and that's a really long-standing establishment in Tarrant County. And both, of course, had they moved before Alyssa Simmons, might have run for county judge. But neither made that move. Mark tried to make the move, but Simmons was already in the race.
Yeah, a year or so ago, I don't think anyone would have predicted these two guys wouldn't be part of Democratic politics in Tarrant County.
One lost on the map, and the other was a tremendous turnout.
Wow. We also want to talk about the chaos and confusion at the polls, not only in Dallas County, but also in Williamson County as well. Hundreds of Democratic voters turned away because they were at the wrong polling place when they showed up to vote on Tuesday. Courts extended the hours in both counties. Ashley, who do you think is to blame here for all of this?
Now, Jason, you know who is to blame
Tell
for
me.
all of this.
Tell me,
We all know
Ashley.
who is to blame for all of this. And I mean, look, it's not, I want to say it's not pointing fingers, but it is pointing fingers. It's the local Republican parties. No one made them do this. No one made them say we're going to have precinct-based voting locations. This is an idea. I think they were sort of the sacrificial lambs, if you will, for the bigger party of Republicans in Texas who want to see this happen. They feel like this is how you increase voter security. The plans were widely flawed, right? You had people having to drive further away from their homes when there were voting locations available to them. The lines, people are having to wait in line 3 hours. In Williamson County, people were ordering DoorDash to the line because they were getting hungry. They were waiting. We had people who showed up to vote, were told, you can't vote here. They go over there. They go over there. No, you can't vote here. You have to go back over there. So even the poll workers didn't even know clearly what was going on. And to add to the confusion, this is what I'm talking about. You have one location that would serve both Republicans and Democrats, but not Republicans and Democrats from the same precinct numbers.
Wow.
Does that make sense? I mean, that's how confusing some of this is. If you're in a household where one person wants to vote in the Republican primary and the other wants to vote in the Democratic primary, you guys together have to go to separate polling locations. It made no sense. Everywhere else in Texas, we have had secure, safe elections. It's easy for people. People did not know. Now, I don't know why people did not know. I'm sure you all said ad nauseum that there's going to be precinct-based voting. I know we did too. We did explainers. We've been talking. But people still don't know. They're creatures of habit. They wake up and think, I'm going to go to the same place I always go to cast my ballot. And I couldn't do it.
We talk about where does the blame go, and I've heard a lot of people say, oh, it goes straight to the Republicans for causing this to start with. At the end of the day, it's up to the Democrats to get the word out, but when it comes down to it, where does this buck stop? It stops with the voter, I think.
I
It
think
stops with the voter.
Yes, there's a lot of lessons to be learned here.
I mean, but
go for it, Ashley. Go for it.
Republicans got turned away from the polls too. It wasn't just Democrats who didn't do a good job of telling people where to go. It was both sides.
Good point.
Go ahead, Ashley.
I'm ready to say
Natalie.
the voters should look up where they're supposed to vote, but you showed us last night that the information wasn't right on the county website.
Correct.
There was no way to find out exactly where to go vote. You literally had to drive around, wishing and hoping, asking questions, knocking on doors like a trick-or-treater, saying, can I vote here? Can I vote here? Can I vote here?
I know two people, someone who had to go to 4 different polling locations before they were allowed to vote at the 5th, and then another 3 before they were allowed to vote at the 4th. The lessons, you circle back, that are going to be learned is, one, you take advantage of early voting time. You have 2 weeks. 2 weeks to do this, and that's plenty of time to get to anywhere in Dallas County or Williamson County for that matter. And then also on Election Day, to your point, when you mentioned the Democrats need to be better about communication with this, I would love for someone to correct me if I am wrong, but I don't recall receiving an email from the Allred campaign or from the Crockett campaign, just off the top of my head, about precinct-specific voting.
Well, if you share your email with them, I'm sure they would love to reach out.
I would love to be wrong. Please.
And get you
share it with
any data and information that they can give you.
I will say, though, the Texas Democratic Party did send out emails. The Texas Democratic Party sent out emails and had links for both Williamson and Dallas counties for folks to do it. But we also can't blame people who want to vote on Election Day, Natalie Haddad. You don't open Christmas presents before Christmas. Some of us don't like to vote
I'm not the person to ask for this.
I'm
not not the person to ask because we
I'm
opened them on
saying.
Christmas Eve. I'm like, wait.
She does. She does.
I mean,
She does,
no, I'm
actually.
not blaming anyone that wants to vote on election day. I think the atmosphere is different. I think there is just something really electric about it. But when you have something this complicated and you are, to your point, Ashley, a creature of habit, I mean, this has to be a much more simple process. People deserve to vote. They have a right to vote. And this was a word I almost said that I cannot on air. It was a bad thing. It was cluster.
This is
It was
streaming.
a cluster.
We'll leave it at
Ashley's
cluster.
raised a good point. Did DoorDash fund this with the Republican Party to generate more sales? It's like, they did just send voters just scattered all over the county. There were even problems in Tarrant County where they had, county-wide voting, but people didn't understand how to look up the sites, where to vote, how to read the map. People didn't even understand it in Tarrant County. I can't imagine Dallas County.
It seems like a really bad experiment, but won't we see this again? I mean, it happened
Future
in
primaries?
2 counties this
Yeah.
time. We were speaking with a Republican strategist last night who said, this has been a mess, but this is sort of the push.
It's becoming more popular with the Republican Party because they want a precinct judge who knows the voters to see them face to face, and they want people to vote in their own precinct. You can't wake up at 6 o'clock on election day and start looking around and going, where am I supposed to go?
Yeah. Wheeler, you have to get up earlier than that.
Yeah,
so
got to
that's
get up
a
early.
lesson for you
I
here.
early vote.
But,
yeah.
but let me ask you, what happens to those provisional ballots that were cast in Williamson County and in Dallas County at between 7 and 9 or 7 and 10 in Williamson County? What happens to those?
I think those provisional ballots go by the wayside. I mean, they're just not confirmed. The ballot board just discards them, and they don't wind up making it in. I voted a provisional ballot this last election. I called in, and they said, yes, sir, your ballot was elected. Not this time, but the special election.
Well, and it was a real gift to Democrats here that James Tallarico stacked up enough votes to make that a moot point, because that was shaping up to be possibly a big distraction and an ugly battle in the courts.
Right, and Allred and Johnson are in a runoff anyway, so.
Yeah.
Hey, we do want to remind you about our podcast. It was a late night here at the studio.
Was it ever?
A Democrat and Republican took apart the wins and losses last night. We stayed up late for that. Brand new episode of Y'all-ticks. It's putting all of this in perspective a little longer than the After the Vote show you're watching right here. This is our immediate reaction to everything that happened there. This episode available right now wherever you get your podcast. You can also watch it on our Plus channel. So Ashley, Bud, Natalie, Wheeler, get some sleep, guys. Thanks so much for
sounds great.
Thanks so much for watching. We appreciate it. And this is the road to November begins now.